Imagine a typical small-town square, the kind of place where you'd normally see a community holiday tree, local concerts, farmers markets, or a summer parade. Picture the usual surroundings: the local administration building, residential houses, maybe a monument to a historical figure. Now, replace the diverse, everyday crowd with an absolute sea of bodies, exclusively young women aged 15 to 25, dancing half naked. And all of this is dedicated to just one man in his 50s. Imagine that this man is a king, not just a respected figure, but an absolute monarch whose word is literally the law of the land. This dance doesn't last an hour or an evening. It goes on for 8 consecutive days. Picture not 500 or 1,000 people on this square, but anywhere from 40 to 100,000. This is no longer just a stage, it's a massive, living human tapestry where every step and every wave of a hand is multiplied tens of thousands of times. Imagine the deafening noise, the heat of the bodies, the flash of jewelry, the dust rising from under their feet, and the realization that all of this is being done to honor a single person. Make no mistake, this is not a movie set, nor the bold fantasy of a film director. This is an annual 21st century reality in a tiny kingdom in the heart of southern Africa. A few years ago, it was known as Swaziland. Today, it is Eswatini. On a map, it looks like a tiny speck, but in a moral and human sense, it acts as a giant magnifying glass, showing just how far our concept of normal can diverge from someone else's everyday reality. The festival is called Umlanga, or the reed dance. Behind this almost poetic name lies a complex world of strict rules, cold calculations, and desperate hopes. It's part of a deeply troubling story about the lives of young women in the last absolute monarchy on the African continent, ruled by King Mswati III.
And naturally, an agonizing question arises. Why do modern girls, kids with smartphones in their hands and social media accounts, do this voluntarily? Why do their families not only allow it, but proudly send them off as if to a monumental event? The answer is a complicated cocktail of ancient rituals, royal whim, crushing poverty, and a sheer attempt to survive when your own ability to shape your destiny is virtually non-existent. By the way, hit that subscribe button. Here on the channel, we regularly break down the most wild and obscure realities of our world. A subscription is your free ticket to places that are incredibly fascinating to hear about, but where you'd probably never want to end up in person. Subscribed? Awesome. Let's keep going. The biggest misconception is this: Umlanga is not a beautiful holiday for tourists, nor is it a show for the cameras. It is grueling, strictly regulated labor, essentially a chain gang under the scorching sun. Colorful photos and short videos usually only show the grand finale, the neat rows of dancers, the jewelry, the smiles, and the drums. But long before the girls ever step foot in the stadium, a completely different part of the ritual takes place: harvesting reeds for the household needs of the Queen Mother, the official mother of the nation. This isn't a simple offering. It is a massive mobilization of female labor. For several days, tens of thousands of girls walk 10 to 15 miles a day to marshlands, where they slash through tall reeds with heavy machetes. Just try to mentally walk this route. First, marching in disciplined columns under the watch of elders under an unforgiving sun. Then, trudging through thick, wet mud where your feet sink, your clothes stick to your body, and your arms quickly burn out from the repetitive motion. Swing, cut, bind. They bundle the reeds into sheaves that can weigh over 40 pounds and carry them all the way back to the royal family's main kraal.
For a fragile teenage spine, 40 pounds is more than just a heavy load. It's a physical ordeal she would never agree to in any other context. The girls sleep out in the open fields or in makeshift shelters built from branches and scavenged materials. There are no modern comforts here, no mattresses, no pillows, no evening showers. They eat basic porridge distributed centrally from massive cauldrons, and for many, this is the only guaranteed meal of the day. What might look to an outsider like the romance of traditional life is actually a brutal test of endurance and submission, for which the state pays absolutely nothing. Concepts like salary, days off, or insurance do not exist here. There is only the invocation of duty to the king and the Queen Mother. Hundreds of tons of this material are later used to build and repair the tall, dense woven fences around the royal residences, fences that literally separate the world of power from the world of the subjects. In our reality, this kind of forced labor mobilization for someone's private property would inevitably spark protests, investigations, and outrage. In theirs, it is considered an honor and a sacred tradition. Refusing to participate threatens a family not only with the judgment of their neighbors, but with the terrifying prospect of turning their backs on their ancestors, risking the well-being of the entire community. The dress code for the participants is equally strict and highly symbolic, leaving no room for self-expression. It's not a personal style choice, but a language through which society reads a girl's status before she even opens her mouth. They wear short, brightly colored skirts woven from threads called indlamu, which expose the legs and leave little room for modesty. In this attire, a girl's body becomes half a part of a national celebration and half a vulnerable object on display, inevitably stripping away many girls' internal sense of security.
But the most crucial details are the woolen tassels they wear. Red and orange are for unmarried, free girls who could theoretically catch the king's eye, while yellow is for those who are already engaged. A single glance at a girl's tassels instantly tells the crowd who she belongs to in the eyes of tradition, how available she is, and what boundaries cannot be crossed. If you think about it, it's just another mechanism of control. Deeply personal information is transformed into a highly visible marker that is impossible to hide. So why do the poorest families, knowing full well the hardships their daughters will face, eagerly send them there? First of all, they are fed for the duration of the festival, saving the family a week's worth of groceries. In households where every mouth to feed is a heavy burden, even 7 days without spending money on a teenager's food is a massive financial relief. Secondly, it is a social elevator. The odds are microscopic, yes, but in a place where other elevators simply do not exist, where the prospects of choosing a career, getting an education, or moving away are close to zero, even a 1 in a million chance feels like a gift from above. But the most important reason? A few years ago, organizers started handing out a pair of basic sneakers to every participant. We aren't talking about trendy designer brands from a boutique window, just new, intact footwear. For villages where people walk barefoot or in torn sandals, this is genuine wealth. It's an item that protects their feet, gives them a sense of dignity, and allows them to walk into a schoolyard or a market without feeling ashamed. Because of this, Umlanga's popularity among the poorest has skyrocketed over the last decade. For many, it is essentially the only real social program where a young girl is guaranteed to get something material in exchange for her exhausting labor. A mother from a remote village once told a foreign journalist, "Let her dance.
At least she'll bring home good shoes." There is no cynicism in that phrase, only the tired calculus of a parent who has almost no other means to provide her child with basic necessities. This is how voluntary participation hits the brick wall of poverty. Technically, no one is dragging them there by force, but desperation and circumstance prove much stronger than any refusal. The grueling field labor is just the prelude, a heavy intro to the main event. The climax takes place at the National Stadium in Lobamba, when over the roar of the crowd and the pounding of drums, the king's motorcade arrives. In this fleeting moment, everything that came before, the miles of marching, the cold nights under the stars, the blisters on hands and feet, compresses into a single, terrifying question. Will he notice me? Thus begins a lottery cruelly dubbed Become the 16th Wife. The title is informal, but the reality is exact. There are tens of thousands of girls, only one king, astronomical odds, and the prize is the rest of your life. The selection of a new wife isn't about courtship or mutual affection. It is a state ritual where the personal dissolves entirely into the political and the sacred. King Mswati III watches from an elevated platform, flanked by advisors and his current wives. They aren't just watching a dance, they are scanning for potential alliances, connections, and future mothers of heirs. The king might step down and touch a girl's shoulder, a highly theatrical gesture that instantly transforms a literal nobody into the chosen one. But more often, he operates through subtle signs, a slight nod, a flick of the wrist, a barely noticeable turn of the head. An aide watches him closely, reads the signal, and relays the command.
The crowd realizes who the chosen one is when a bright red feather of the rare Turako bird is suddenly placed in her hair, a tiny object that instantly alters her entire existence. For the girl herself, this split second hits like a shockwave, a mix of ecstasy, terror, bewilderment, and the crushing realization that there is no turning back. She is physically pulled from the dancing circle, separated from her friends and familiar faces, and taken to a prep tent where the system begins molding her into a new piece of the royal puzzle. Soon after, she is driven away to one of the royal palaces. Her old life is over, left behind along with her childhood habits, school friends, and dirt village roads. The royal math is staggering. According to various, often convoluted sources, King Mswati III already has 15 or more official wives and dozens of children. Even without knowing the exact headcount, it's clear that this is an entire separate world functioning inside the state, a massive harem that requires endless funding, security, and maintenance. The cost of upholding this harem, the palaces, the luxury cars, and the foreign trips, falls squarely on the budget of a small, impoverished country, where a vast portion of the population barely has money for survival. The paradox is glaring. The more luxury glitters at the top, the wider the gaping holes become at the bottom. In the late 2010s, when local teachers and doctors were actively striking over months of unpaid wages, the king casually purchased 19 Rolls-Royces and 120 BMWs for his wives and inner circle. Those numbers are permanently burned into the memory of the citizens. They are impossible to forget when you are looking at your empty wallet and walking past locked, unfunded clinics. The moment those gleaming new luxury cars rolled into the country, while the people who save lives and educate children couldn't put food on the table, became the ultimate symbol of inequality and a completely disconnected government.
Even those who hold deep respect for tradition and the monarchy saw this as wildly excessive, a clear sign that the ruling elite operates in an alternate universe, barely touching the reality of the majority. How do you like those royal priorities? Drop a comment below right now and tell us what people would say to a leader in your country if they bought a fleet of Rolls-Royces while refusing to pay surgeons and teachers. Let's see whose scenario is the harshest. And while you're at it, hit the like button on this video. It's our main currency, and unlike the king's car fleet, it's completely free. The life of the winner of this lottery is the textbook definition of a golden cage. On one hand, she gets a palace or a luxurious mansion, a staff of servants ready to execute her every command, the chance to wear the finest European designers, and elite shopping tours abroad. Things that most girls in the country couldn't even dream of suddenly become her mundane reality. The new royal wife sees a world she never had access to, rides in ultra-expensive cars, and visits places she had only heard rumors about. But behind this glittering facade lies a darker layer of reality, suffocating protocol and relentless control. She is permitted almost zero contact with men outside of the royal guard. Any casual conversation can be interpreted as a threat to her reputation or suspicion of disloyalty. Her connection to the outside world and even her own family is severely restricted. Visits with relatives turn into rare, heavily monitored episodes rather than free family gatherings. She is obligated to observe strict ritual taboos, wake up at designated times, attend specific ceremonies, look exactly as her status dictates, and always remember that she is being watched. Her state duty is formulated simply and ruthlessly: bear heirs and demonstrate absolute loyalty. Everything else fades into the background. Freedom of choice, personal life, and career aspirations are completely erased.
If, before this, the girl had hopes of learning a profession, going to college, or working independently, her path is now permanently set. She will be a wife and mother within the confines of the royal house. The great paradox of this system is that despite the outward absolute power of the lion, the king, there is a massive female center of gravity right at its core. The Queen Mother holds the title of Ndlovukati, or the Great She-Elephant, and even the monarch bows his head to her. This symbolic imagery isn't just a colorful nickname, it denotes the sheer scale, weight, and unshakable stability of her power. Eswatini essentially operates under a dual monarchy. The king, Ngemayama, is the head of state, the one who signs decrees and acts as the face of the nation.
But the Queen Mother is the head of the nation and the ultimate keeper of traditions. Her word isn't law in a strictly legal sense, but without her blessing, the king makes no major decisions, including the choice of a new wife. Every new marriage and every crucial ceremony must be woven perfectly into the fabric of the tradition she guards. Her power borders on the mystical. It is widely believed that through rituals, she communicates with ancestral spirits and has the power to control the rain. In a society where agriculture, pastures, and harvests depend entirely on the weather, the ability to control the rain literally translates to the power of life and death. Because of this, the young girls at Umlanga fear the wrath of the great she-elephant far more than they fear the police or even the king himself. A fine or a punishment from the authorities is a recognizable earthly problem, but a drought, an illness, or a terrible misfortune striking a family and village due to her supernatural anger, that is pure terror. The current Queen Mother, Ntombitwala, has survived political crises and unrest, rarely stepping out onto the public front line, yet seamlessly preserving her son's grip on power.
Her ultimate strength lies in her ability to remain in the shadows while controlling the key levers of the nation and maintaining the illusion of unchanging, eternal traditions. She props up these traditions because this sacred authority is what guarantees the stability of her position and her ruling clan. If that authority were to crack, the foundation of the entire system would collapse, taking her family's safety down with it. But even this immense authority, built on deep-rooted fear and faith, is utterly powerless against the nation's greatest threat, one that cannot be intimidated by a ritual or canceled by a royal decree. That main threat is the HIV epidemic. According to the World Health Organization, Eswatini has held the highest adult HIV prevalence rate in the world for years. Roughly 27 out of every 100 adults are carriers of the virus. For a small nation, this means that practically every social circle, every village, and every family has someone affected by it. Among young women and girls, the rates are even higher. Polygamy and early marriages, where a young girl is bound to a much older man whose sexual history is unknown and rarely questioned, massively accelerate the spread of the infection. Under these grim conditions, a young girl's body becomes a battlefield where ancient tradition collides directly with a deadly disease, and her ability to protect herself is tragically limited. In the early 2000s, King Mswati III tried to address this catastrophe using the only logic the system knew: ritual. He implemented the Umchwasho rite, effectively a nationwide chastity decree. The core of it was a strict ban on premarital relations for unmarried girls under 18. Girls were issued colored woolen tassels to wear as a visible sign of their vow, yet another marker allowing society to track who was following the rules.
If a girl broke the rule and got caught, she faced a fine, usually amounting to 1 cow, payable to the local village chief. With the stroke of a pen, a girl's personal, private choice was instantly transformed into a devastating economic penalty for her family. The world reacted with mixed feelings. On one hand, it looked like a desperate, sweeping attempt to fight the epidemic, using the only tools available: bans, collective control, and public shame. On the other hand, the entire burden of responsibility was aggressively shifted onto young women, completely ignoring the behavior of men and the king himself. The sheer irony peaked shortly after the decree was enacted, when Mswati himself took an underage bride. The scandal was deafening. The blatant hypocrisy of the absolute monarch breaking his own newly minted chastity law was too obvious to ignore. Under intense pressure from the public and traditional elders, the king was forced to publicly admit his violation and symbolically pay the fine of 1 cow. Naturally, this didn't change his daily life, but the gesture highlighted the profound duality of a system where even the supreme ruler must formally bow to the rules he creates, while remaining entirely insulated from the real-world consequences that his subjects suffer. This episode perfectly illuminated the glaring double standards and the absolute futility of simple bans in fighting an epidemic whose roots run deep into the core of the power structure, gender roles, and severe economic dependency. Today, the younger generation in Eswatini lives torn between two realities. By day, they navigate the Umkwasho tassels, the ancient rituals, the stern guidance of elders, and lectures on how to live correctly to avoid bringing ruin upon their family. They hear the heavy authority of centuries in these voices, and in most communities, arguing back is simply not an option.
But by night, that same teenage girl picks up a smartphone, which is practically ubiquitous now.
goes online and sees a radically different world. She watches her peers in other countries discuss education, careers, choosing their own partners, human rights, and travel. She hears them talk openly about health, boundaries, and safety. These two wildly different realities violently collide in her mind, offering no easy compromise. On one side is the deep-seated fear of social exile and the desperate desire to remain connected to her family and ancestors. On the other side is a growing, unshakable feeling that life can and should be different. Overlaid on this is the constant, heavy background noise of the epidemic. The grim news, the whispered conversations, the frequent funerals, the tragic stories of someone who suddenly got sick. This brutal conflict between the archaic, crushing weight of tradition, the bright lure of modernity, and a devastating health crisis creates intense tension for an entire generation. They are forced to cling to a rigid past while staring into a screen that promises a future with entirely different rules. The bottom line is simple, yet incredibly hard to accept. Eswatini is not a living museum, nor is it an exotic fairy tale where time has frozen forever in a display of bright costumes and rhythmic dancing. It is a very real country of about 1.2 million people, operating on its own logic, with its own complex conflicts and quiet tragedies. The people there are not characters in an ethnographic documentary. They are living, breathing men and women, desperately trying to build a life in a framework where power and tradition leave them almost zero room to breathe. It is easy for us to judge this country and its people by our modern Western standards, but trying to actually understand them is far harder and much more important.
Down there, traditions and rituals are often stronger than written law and frequently overpower basic medical common sense. The pressure of custom can override even the most obvious advice from specialists. These traditions permeate absolutely everything, from the poorest dirt floor hut where a family counts every bowl of porridge, all the way up to the gilded palace where elites decide who gets the next luxury car. Behind the glossy tourist photos of synchronized dancing, behind the footage used to decorate travel brochures and vibrant commercials, lies a rigid hierarchy, crushing economic necessity, and the daily struggle of young women for elementary survival and health. The reed dance is not just an exotic spectacle, it is a harsh, brutal bargain for survival in a world where the past has a death grip on the present, and for now, it has absolutely no intention of letting go.